We've now had a few days since the CHL NTDP Top Prospects Showdown has completed, and I've rewatched the games and have a whole bunch of notes written down on the players who excelled, those who didn't, and everything in between.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we'll be breaking down the recent two games between the top draft eligible prospects of the CHL, the team put together there of just all-star level talents of this 2026 draft class, against the NTDP. So theoretically, the best of American junior hockey versus the best of Canadian junior hockey. And a little bit like last year, the expectations this season were for an absolute blowout for Team CHL, the All-Stars, the guys that don't play together, don't have chemistry, but have more talent than their opposition, whereas the NTDP this season has had a bit of a struggle fest in many regards. They went the entire month of October, the U18 squad, without a single victory. In November, they caught a little bit of their footing at the U18 Five Nations tournament, but still was very much a lineup that most people, myself included, I've watched this team a whole bunch already this season, was not expecting them to fare very well at this display. But in reality, they end up winning it in super overtime, played convincingly in both games, won one of those in regulation, and overall shocked the hockey world a little bit. So we've got a lot of interesting storylines from this game, whether it be certain players from that underdog NTDP squad who really showed their value at this showcase, or some players as well from the CHL team who either surpassed expectations or in some regards perhaps did not quite meet those expectations and did so on a pretty big stage, because there is not going to be a single game played ever again in the history of hockey, before or after, than these two games, with more players included who are going to be drafted in the 2026 NHL draft. This is the game to watch if you want to just get bulk viewings in on players who will be coming into the draft this season. Basically every single player, with maybe the exception of 5 or 6 of the guys on the NTDP team, they're all getting drafted this year pretty much. So a lot to dig into here, a lot of different storylines that we could focus on for today's episode. So make yourselves comfortable, grab something to sip on, and we'll just kick things off here in the first segment with basically just the key takeaways from these games. What have we learned? In the second segment, we'll talk about the standout performers. And in the third segment, we'll wrap things up with perhaps some of the disappointments from this showcase, the guys whose stock may have fallen a little bit in the general consensus. So I don't think we can start anywhere other than the fact that the NTDP was better than we expected them to be. They were better than I expected them to be, and I've watched them a bunch. They were better than anybody that I talked to or heard talking about this showcase expected them to be as well. And I think that the imbalance of elite talent between these two rosters, and there is a big one. Like, the CHL roster has a lot more elite game-breaking talent, a lot more guys that are going to be first round or top 64 picks on draft day, and yet the NTDP was much more structured than their CHL opposition was. They were more controlled. They clearly had more chemistry, and overall had an understanding of where their line mates were going to be and what their habits are on the ice, whether it be in the defensive zone or in terms of offensive rotations and being precise with those passing sequences. With Team CHL, with all the talent in the world, if you can't predict where your teammate's going to be, you can't get him the puck in the best possible place. And I think we saw that quite a bit, of just those slight errors in timing with the CHL lineup and some absolutely brilliant flashes of individual skill coming from guys like Chase Reed or Xavier Villeneuve, of course, who was the engine of that team, the conductor, and easily the best player on the ice at the showcase. And yet with the NTDP, it wasn't fancy. It was the small details where they were able to gain the advantage, and it was through the small details that they won this showcase at the end of the day. The forechecking intensity, the overall checking skill, the snarl, the hunger, the meaning. Every single goal that at the NTDP scored, there was this eruption of celebration amongst the players to an extent that a group of all-star players who've just met each other for the first time or seen each other for the first time in a while or since playing against each other last can't quite fuel the same type of hunger. And I think we saw that gap between these teams at this showcase. And again, with the NTDP as well, they don't have that perhaps elite level talent. They didn't have a single player that really projected to go top 20 on draft day at this point. And yet, I think that they were very pacey in their execution. They worked hard when pucks went loose and things got a bit messier. They adapted quicker, and I think at the end of the day, it's those thin margins, and that made the difference here at this tournament. You saw players like Victor Plant for the NTDP just absolutely running things on his line and outworking every single player on the ice against him. So I think that mismatch perhaps in energy and intensity between the two lineups as a whole really made a difference at the end of the day. Because again, when you make a collection, an all-star team roster, you're going for a lot of the most skilled players. And for a showcase, it's not about making the most cohesive lineup to win the game. It's about showcasing the top talents for the draft. And I think that roster construction hurt Team CHL a bit in this game, but credit where it's due. The NTDP earned this. They played hard. Quite a few players, more than a handful of players on the NTDP team, were skating the hardest that I've seen them skate all season this weekend. So a lot of those things I think just coincided that the NTDP just looked a real beat quicker than they have been all year long. And I think as well that the addition of a player like Wyatt Cullen, who only returned from injury in early November, his presence on this team makes a massive difference. He gives them a dynamic offensive focal point and takes some weight off of Victor Plant's shoulders in terms of the burden of offensive generation as a playmaker. And I think that between those two players, you really had guys that were able to create even against the top two lines of Team CHL and the top defensive pairings. And there's a lot of quality on the blue line on that team, let me tell you. And yet, I think that the NTDP really did deserve this at the end. And yeah, I was as surprised as you may have been. My expectation were like 8-2 games, basically. I was thinking it was going to be a pair of blowouts, and it was anything but. This was intense, tight hockey. Definitely some messiness, definitely some chaos, definitely some gray hairs for the coaches on each team here. But overall, I think that the NTDP did a great job and were certainly elevated by fantastic goaltending at the showcase. Both goaltenders who played for the NTDP, the team's two goaltenders this season, did fantastic in their respective starts. In the first game, that was Brady Noling, who's a potential top 2 round prospect in this year's draft. And he is 6'5", but moves with such fluidity and athleticism that has scouts gushing from the mouth. But the results have kind of like lagged behind those raw tools for quite some time. And even this season, he's had some on and off nights, put it that way. But at this showcase, he played in game 1, which was the victory for the NTDP, and he was the best player on the ice for massive stretches of that game. He stopped 42 of 44 shots and stopped nearly a full goal above expected at only 5-on-5. So just ridiculous stuff there for Brady Noling, who really is cementing himself as a very interesting prospect for this year's draft class. And then we also had Luke Carruthers, who stopped 33 of 37 shots in game 2, as well as all 4 shots in the series deciding super overtime. And at 5-on-5, he stopped a ridiculous 2 full goals above expected. So even when his team was on its heels, he really did come in big. So both netminders made the difference there for the NTDP. And I think that between that mismatch in overall team chemistry and lineup balance between checking lines and playmakers and finishers, that balance was just a lot more present with the NTDP, because again, this is a team that is built to be a team rather than just a showcase roster. And you add in the high-end goaltending, and you can kind of see why this upset happened. But that wraps things up here for the first segment. In the next one, we're going to go down the list of the standout performers, the best players at this tournament who really, really rose their stocks in the eyes of scouts, whether they be in the public like myself or affiliated with NHL teams. But before we do that, we've got a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's so easy to lose track. And that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or even on your phone. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where it is that my money is going and how to make it work harder for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, let's keep this show rolling as we're breaking down the top performers from the CHL NTDP Top Prospects Showcase. And overall, I've really enjoyed this event. The fact that you have this many draft eligible players playing 2 games against each other, where you can watch everyone on the same footing, on the same sheet of ice, on the same night, is a real joy as a scout, to kind of just also have an extra barometer to compare players that are playing either in the NTDP or in the CHL, to kind of see where the gaps lie between them, whether it be in motor and intensity or skating ability. You see it much more clearly when they're literally on the ice against each other than when you're trying to go between different viewings, shot from different angles and different heights and different lenses. It can be a bit more difficult, especially from a video scouting perspective. So having games like this is really, really helpful. It's a calibrating tool. But more than anything, it was fun. I really enjoyed this tournament, this showcase this year. Much more entertaining than last year's was, which was just an absolute blowout. These games were really, really fun. But let's dive into the guys that really, really benefited their own draft stocks here at this display. And there's nowhere to start here other than Xavier Villeneuve. He was the best player in this showcase by a country mile and a half. It was not even close. This was the player who ran things offensively on the ice for Team CHL. He was in so many ways a spark plug that woke them back up in game 2 to even force it to that super overtime, to win that second leg in order to be back on even ground after the defeat in game 1. And he was the one that really conducted sequences in the offensive zone. He's truly a quarterback from the blue line on the power play, but he showed more and more his ability to do so at even strength. The deceptiveness, the manipulation from the blue line, it's so Lane Hudson-esque, and he's got more size than Lane Hudson did in his draft year. He's got better skating than Lane Hudson did in his draft year. the sky's the limit for Xavier Villeneuve. I really think that he showed at this showcase that he is a top 5 talent in this year's draft class. And for me, I don't think he's budging from a top 5 slot all year because he just is that special of a talent. And as somebody who has had some learning lessons with dynamic, undersized defensemen in the past, whether it be success stories like Lane Hudson or some other ones with perhaps a slightly less sparkling development following their drafts. I feel like offensive defensemen, especially when there's some size concerns, that's one of the areas or one of the player profiles that I feel most confident in evaluating out there in hockey. And Xavier Villeneuve checks every single box that I have. He's got an elite level motor. He's among the most intelligent players in this year's draft class. He was the smartest player on the ice at this showcase, that's for sure. Thinks the game at a lightning quick pace, moves his feet so fluidly with so much speed as well. Got a high stride rate, gets underneath opponents. He plays with some grit and intensity. He's not one to just be taken out of the play physically and not put up a fight. That's not his game whatsoever. And in terms of playmaking skill and passing ability and vision, it's just elite across the board for any skater, let alone just for a defenseman. So Xavier Villeneuve, clearly a riser, and showed that he was a step above even the other like top 10 contenders at this showcase, especially for Team CHL there. Then we move on to the NTDP with Wyatt Cullen, who we've already mentioned a little bit there in the first segment, but he was fantastic at this tournament. He played a massive role for the NTDP, was the author of some of the most dynamic sequences in the offensive zone. He's able to blend some like really high-end speed, high-end, like a quick thinking. He's very pacey, very skilled, attacks the middle of the ice. Has very strong hands as well. He's able to really weave between defenders and get his way to the dangerous areas with real elegance as well on the puck, creating shooting lanes, and overall just making the most of the space that's offered to him, and those quick changes of pace and ability to handle at speed, where his pace was just going to continue being an advantage at the highest levels, because it's just that good. Wyatt Cullen really stood out to me at this showcase, and especially for a player who only came back from injury in early November. He's made his mark for this NTDP team. He's become their most dynamic offensive player. He's becoming a real high-end offensive driver for them. But at this showcase against talents of his own age group, I think what he really showcased at this showcase is just that his skill level is really high-end for this draft class, and that compared to the top 15 caliber prospects on Team CHL, Wyatt Cullen in terms of skill and deceptiveness and overall offensive talent is on par with the best of them. And we have him ranked at 44th overall in our recent rankings at Elite Prospect, but trust me, he will be rising on our next ones. We are already regretting having him that low. So I think that Wyatt Cullen certainly showed that he's a can't miss prospect in this year's draft and has first round caliber talent. And he also scored a beautiful power play goal here, which was one of the best of the entire event, where he built downhill speed, caught the puck, and quickly pulled it into fire around the defender into the top corner. So quick shout out as well to Mitch Brown, who wrote an article on the top performers of the showcase. It'll be linked in the description down below if you want to give it a read on Elite Prospects. But quickly moving on, because we have some other standouts to highlight here. We've got Victor Plant from the NTDP, who again really shone with that high-end motor, great playmaking skill, high-end intelligence, really quick processing, and overall just got that dog in him. He showed that on the super overtime winner. He scored the deciding goal to win this for the NTDP. And it was just kind of like recycling along the wall. It was kind of like a lost puck, and He ended up retaining possession along the boards, going back to the offensive blue line before cutting inside across a CHL marker, gaining that inside positioning and just going downhill down the middle of the slot and finishing his chance with some space. And it was a nice release, but more than anything, it was the power mechanics, the strength, the competitiveness that stood out to me on that play that really made it happen and created that opportunity. So Victor Plant certainly is on the cusp of our second and first rounds at Elite Prospects. And with that combination of work ethic, of playmaking, of intelligence, and overall competitiveness in all three zones in any situation at any point in the game, he's certainly one to watch, and he showed at this level that he can be a game breaker even against the top competition of his own age group. Then we've got Carson Carrolls of Team CHL, really sturdy left shot defenseman who just does so many different things really well. He's tough to push off the puck. He can really finish his hits with some thunderous power. He's able to drive up the middle of the ice. He's a really smooth skater. He's able to carry pucks out in the breakout. He has a good first pass as well when he's looking for that stretch pass to really catch the opponent on a break. And I thought that he settled things down really nicely for Team CHL and was among their most consistent performers across the two games. He's a player that I think really will entice a lot of NHL teams with just how much his game is built for the modern NHL. The ice just always tilted in his favor when he was on the ice, and he was a brick wall defensively, denying zone entries, and overall just denying every single thing that the NTDP threw at him. They struggled a lot to generate chances when he was on the ice, and offensively, he was also super involved, whether it be setting up 3 chances in the first game with his high-end vision from the point, or even activating up into space in game 2. He had some misses in the breakout and wasn't perfect. There's definitely still things to iron out here, but he looks the part of a top 10 pick and a potential number 2 or number 3 defenseman in the National Hockey League. And I think that upside with a very projectable style of play and strong defensive habits and physicality and offensive room to grow as well, he might go as high as like 6th overall on draft day. He might be going higher than people expect him to just because he's built for the modern National Hockey League. Then the last 2 guys I wanted to give shout outs to here were checking wingers for either team. For Team CHL, Adam Novotny really stood out to me with his intensity, with his power, with his strength, driving the middle of the ice, showcasing his ability to really get off decent scoring chances in tight. He collects shots from dangerous areas. He gets open in those spaces as well, and I think overall was just very opportunistic and direct and yeah, very effective as a projectable, physically involved, maybe middle 6 NHL projection. He looks the part of a mid-first round pick for sure at this point, and a guy that hasn't gotten his kind of laurels praised too much in the public just yet is Parker Trottier of the NTDP, the grandson of Brian Trottier. And this is an intense checking winger who works really, really hard every single shift, keeps things simple, plays with pace, doesn't really lose possession often at all, but he wins it very often. Strong in battles. I thought that he really did a great job at disrupting the CHL. Everything felt choppy for them when he was on the ice, just constantly getting a stick into passing lanes, getting a stick onto past pucks to deflect them out into space and just chasing after them with real zeal. I think that Parker Trottier is a really fun potential, like, 3rd round pick, maybe 2nd round pick if a team really likes him on draft day, who could just be a really nice bottom 6 checker in the National Hockey League. But that wraps things up here for the second segment. And the final one, we'll wrap it up with 4 players who struggled a little bit at this showcase. But before we do that, we've got a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, and even my skin. That's why I've been using DripDrop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. DripDrop is not your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. I like using DripDrop as part of my daily routine. I'll mix in a packet in the morning before the gym or even during that midday slump. Hydration has become an absolute non-negotiable for me, and DripDrop is an essential part of my day. Right now, it's offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard and keep your body and mind performing at their best with DripDrop. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be such an absolute headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Gametime comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack to scoring NHL tickets cheap, fast, and easy, and stress-free. I recently used Gametime to grab tickets for a Habs game, and it couldn't have been simpler. I had great seats in minutes, and they even allowed me to check out my view from my seat in order to make sure that I didn't have a beam or something blocking my view to ruin the experience. You can even find NHL tickets for under $25. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, let's wrap up the show here with just a quick segment on 4 players who did struggle a little bit at this showcase. Of course, it's not the end of their stories for their draft year season. They have loads of time to turn things around or add the elements they need to in order to recoup some ground here. But still, I think it's worth highlighting the guys that may have fallen a little bit for various reasons by virtue of their performances at this showcase. And there's nowhere to start here other than Ryan Rubrick, a player who has struggled a lot this season in the OHL. And that was clear as well at this prospect showcase, a player who had a really good season last year as a D-1. Scored 41 goals in the OHL, really showing combination of physicality and goal scoring ability and a lot of skill to really finish off his chances. But at this tournament, and overall this season, he's just been so disengaged, and he even got benched towards the end of the second game. The entire third period, I believe, he was stapled to the bench. They just didn't play him. And I mean, I can understand some frustration coming from his side here of being benched in a showcase, because the goal here isn't just to win, it's to showcase the top prospects, and he was invited, and then they stopped showcasing him. That said, in order to retain your spot, even in a showcase environment, you should probably show that you want to be there. And Rubrick was invisible on most shifts, wasn't skating very hard. He wasn't getting to the dangerous areas. He wasn't daring with the puck on his stick. He was lackadaisical in so many different sequences. And this has certainly not been like the best viewing I've gotten of Rubrick this season. Like I've seen him play better than this. But still, it's a lot of these same patterns that have emerged this season where he clearly doesn't love the environment in Niagara, would have liked to have played somewhere else this season with that trade request that he submitted. And I think that's really seeping into his joy for the game clearly this season. And yeah, he looked, he struggled at this tournament. And I think that you're going to see him dropping on boards. He's already dropped for us at Elite Prospects down to 23rd overall. We'll see how other perhaps outlets follow suit. But moving on, we've got Mathis Preston. Bit of a different case with Preston, because I think a lot of fans that would have watched this showcase would actually have come away with the impression that Preston was among the most skilled and dynamic players there among anyone. And you're completely right. He is. This is a very dynamic offensive player. He's an undersized winger with a wicked shot and a tendency to shoot. And he just loves having the puck on his stick. Very, very fluid and an agile skater, strong puck handler as well. And yet he's shown on the power play. He's shown when he had space to work with. And when things got congested at even strength, you really did see his effectiveness break down in so many different cases. I think with Preston, he really is relying, as currently constructed, on space and time to really just flash all the talent that he has. But he's going to have to learn to do that while pushing the middle of the ice harder, while working in congested spaces, while scoring goals that aren't as pretty as the ones that he's used to scoring on average, because they can't all be. They can't all just be works of art. They can't all just be like a painter brushing across this beautiful canvas that is the ice when you're skating around on it. And Mathis Preston really is like an artist when he's at his best. And we saw that at this showcase. There were certain sequences where the puck was just glued to his stick and he's just dancing between opponents. And yet there were extended sequences where he wasn't there to be seen at all. So I think that Mathis Preston's a guy that, maybe not because of this tournament, but because of his overall profile and the lack of scoring that he's had so far this season relative to expectations and where he was at last year, he's a bit of a faller. But it's less, I think, case specifically of this tournament, but still a storyline to keep an eye on, because he's either going to be a guy that drops and ends up being an absolute gem, or maybe he's a guy that gets drafted kind of where he should and falls short of that mark. I don't quite know just yet. He's a bit of a boomer bust prospect, but he sure is a bunch of fun to watch. But we'll wrap things up here with the last couple players I wanted to underline here that struggled a little bit. And the first one, not entirely his fault either. That's Blake Zielinski of the NTDP, was basically the 13th forward at this showcase. And this is a very skilled player with a really great shot. His value comes entirely on the offensive side of the puck. So to have him in a bit more of a checking role where he was playing very limited minutes, and when he did see the ice, it was not just for offensive zone faceoffs. Yeah, he's kind of unfit for that kind of role. And I think it goes to show as well some of the concerns that we have with his projection is the lack of fallback game. If the goal scoring, the talent, the skill isn't able to elevate him to like a true middle six role in the National Hockey League, or even second line role, there's no fallback game. There's no like high motor checking play. That just isn't his game. And I think that's going to disincentivize some teams from swinging on him inside the top 50 on draft day. But last but not least, we've got Daxon Rudolph. A very toolsy defenseman, skates well, got a good frame, over 6'2" as a right shot defenseman, but he just wasn't proactive at this showcase. He was very vanilla, playing things very conservatively, always choosing the simple play rather than the best play. And I think there was a limitation that I saw in pushing his boundaries a little bit and really seeing what he's able to do. That lack of exploration in his game, I think, is something that could limit his upside and perhaps cap his development curve a bit. Whereas other defensemen in this draft class are going straight up, Daxon Rudolph is kind of trudging along on a slightly upward trend. But when your competition is just skyrocketing, that slow upward trend is kind of falling relative to those other names. So I think with Daxon Rudolph, you have really interesting tools, and he could become a really interesting second pair guy if things work out for him in his development. But there's also a world that he just becomes a kind of do everything okay third pairing defenseman in the National Hockey League, and that could also make him drop a little bit away from that top tier of defensemen in the 2026 draft. But that wraps things up here for our episode here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, please do leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts of this prospect showcase? Who stood out to you? I would love to hear your opinions. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always greatly appreciated. And for your second listen, you're going to head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything that you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for listening as always, and I'll catch you tuning in again very, very soon.